It's no secret that power creep in Pokemon has gotten pretty crazy over the generations. We have Mons with absurd base stats that crush a lot of early gen Mons viability, so it's kind of exciting when we hear an old gen Mon is getting a buff or even a new evolution. Finally, we can see these crap Mons thrive with their new evolutions, and these generally do work as we have received some great upgrades on cross-gen evolutions. Mons like Gliscor, Politoed, and Annihilate have become meta-defining and even ban-worthy successors of their evolution lines. But we can't always have this kind of success with newly introduced evolutions, as many looked promising only to fold under the pressure and collapse like a cheap tent from Walmart. And those Mons are who we're going to talk about today. Cross-gen evolutions that really drop the ball and fail. Electivire and Magmortar were built on the lovable Electabuzz and this guy. Butt-headed Duckmon. Yeah, Gen 1 had all the best designs. But it did give these single-stage Gen 1 Mons some big hype going into the Gen 4 games. By the way, I'm still upset they didn't show any love to Jinx, which is kind of like the third in this trio. They all got their baby forms in Gen 2, but Jinx was snuffed in evolution. Bruh. Kinda whack to me. But anyways, as far as designs go for these Mons, fire. And electric. I'm a big fan of Electivire personally, and Magmortar is a pretty decent upgrade. But looking at how these Mons fared in competitive, they were just underwhelming, even though they looked great on paper. Electivire gained a lot of attack, a pretty thick amount, that I don't think anyone can complain about. We've seen plenty of Mons thrive with less attack, so why couldn't Electivire? Well, there are a few factors that contributed to Electivire's underwhelming performance in competitive. First of all, when it evolves from Electabuzz, its speed stat drops by 10 points. This is actually kind of a big deal, as it was sitting at a pretty good speed tier with 105 base speed. Keeping this speed stat would have been amazing for Electivire, as it would outspeed the plethora of Mons sitting at base 100, other base 95 Mons it currently speed ties with, and a big one is the 102 base speed Garchomp. As Garchomp has been a staple of OU for many generations, being able to outspeed it and one-shot it would provide at least a niche for Electivire, as it has great coverage options in its move pool to force 50-50 plays and even gain chip through pivoting with its decently strong Volt Switch. However, the 10-point speed drop really kills this Mon, as if you are struggling to outspeed a lot of Mons and are not particularly Pokemon yourself, you're gonna have a bad time. This evolution didn't even really give any bulk either, just a measly 10 points added into HP and defense. I don't see why they had to take away its speed and force it to run a plus speed nature, just to try and give it a chance to outspeed other base 95s or base 100 Mons without a speed boosting nature. The 123 attack stat looks even less impressive when you actually look at its great coverage moves. It gets the elemental punches and moves like Earthquake, Flamethrower, and some unreliable fighting coverage. But when you look at the base power of its moves, you can see why it just doesn't hit hard enough to make a significant impact. The elemental punches hit with 75 base power, which means you really need a ×4 effective hit to do significant damage. Physical electric types are also down bad when it comes to stab options. They have to either rely on the weak as hell Thunder Punch or Wild Charge, a base 90 attack that has no secondary effect and gives you 1/4 recoil. They need to give this Mon Plasma Fist in close combat immediately. Let's bump up that speed stat to 105 again. Give it a chance. Moving on to Magmortar, it is pretty similar to how they crushed the dreams of my bud, Electivire. The main difference is that Magmar gave it an even lower speed tier to neuter than Electabuzz. So now we have a fire type with not very impressive bulk for a 3-stage evolution and 83 base speed. This means we're easily revenge killed by a lot of Mons who can hit decently hard, which is pretty much what the upper tiers are made of. And we also have a hard time getting in scenarios to succeed, as fire types are weak to stealth rocks, which are very common in most tiers. The 125 special attack is nice, especially because Fire Blast is a lot stronger than any stab Electivire would use, but it feels like at best, Magmortar is a one and done.
I'm
You
dying.
can get cheeky with some sets like a Power Herb Solar Beam set to bait in would-be fire switch-ins like water and rock types, but then you're dedicating a team slot to a gimmick that might not even work very well. On paper, this mon looks pretty decent in that it could carve a niche in higher tiers, but it doesn't get too much more than powerful fire stab and decent coverage that is either risky to use or will only KO times for effective hits. If it had a better ability that it could take advantage of offensively, that would be a lifesaver. Flame Body on a mon with 75 HP and 67 defense is not ideal, as the only real use is punishing U-turn spam or going for a Hail Mary burn while sacking this mon. Give this mon Mega Launcher and a few moves to abuse it like Aura Sphere and Dark Pulse, or even abilities like Flash Fire, which would give it some defensive utility and power up its only redeemable attribute. Now that we got the obvious ones out of the way, let's switch over to a newer evolution. We're talking about the long-awaited Girafarig evolution, Farigiraf. First thing we're going to address right away is what all these mons have in common. They just can't help themselves from making them slower and slower. At least this mon got a noticeable buff in bulk. It came at a greater cost of speed than the previous two mons we covered, but it does have some tools to make it useful in lower tiers. A setup stored power set is actually pretty usable in low tiers, as it can boost its speed and calm mine up its special stats. Having an ability that blocks priority like Sucker Punch and First Impression is pretty nice too. This mon unfortunately just takes too long to get going, and in the faster paced higher tiers, this mon never really got a chance to do anything. You either have to be super bulky or have reliable recovery to set up enough to sweep as a slow sweeper. Farigiraf just comes up short to the point where it's not worth using over more reliable mons. It does have access to Wish, but with that you're usually forced to run Protect as well, which takes up a coverage option. As far as defensive sets, this mon boasts a whopping 1 resistance and 1 immunity, which doesn't give it a lot of walling potential. Weaknesses to 2 of the most common moves in U-turn and Knockoff doesn't help either. The best thing to come out of this mon was helping Girafarig shine, as it was eligible to hold Eviolite and have a niche in lower tiers. It actually got banned from Little Cup, but it has to be an accomplishment, right? The last mon for this video shares very similar characteristics as Farigiraf. We're talking about the new Stantler evolution, Wyrdeer. This is pretty much Farigiraf, but with its stats distributed worse. It has the ability to run physical or special sets with pretty decent base 105 stats in attack and special attack, but I feel like it would have been much better off if they spread these stats with more of a purpose. It has a couple great abilities. Zap Sipper lets it gain an immunity to grass, another trait it shares with Farigiraf by the way, but Intimidate is what really makes me feel like this mon could have been decent. Combining Intimidate with his signature move Psy Shield Bash could have made this mon a great answer to physical attackers. If it had more speed, it would be able to switch in, intimidate the opponent, and grab the defense boost that hitting Psy Shield Bash guarantees and essentially double its defense in 1 turn. Combining that with its great move pool for being a normal type, we are talking a pretty versatile mon. No longevity hurts this mon a lot. I was hoping with its Psychic type addition that it would gain access to Recover, but it must rely on either rest or items for healing. Why not give this mon recovery? Even Horn Leech would be welcome, as it's very fitting to get this move. Farigiraf at least is rocking out decently in NU this gen, while Wyrdeer is sitting in the dumpster of PU. For a newly released mon, this is pretty much the ultimate failure, and has secured Wyrdeer its place on my list for the worst cross-gen Pokemon evolutions. Failure. Do you have any other additions to this list? Or do you have any ideas on how to improve the mons I mentioned? Leave a comment below. I've been really enjoying the discussion and replying to the comments on these types of videos. My goal is to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you enjoy competitive Pokemon and discussion videos, I'd appreciate you sticking around and hitting the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, buds.